Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody being here tonight, and we're so excited for this opportunity to be able to escort the Interpreter Foundation and all you wonderful people on tour to Mesoamerica, where we consider the land of the Book of Mormon to have taken place. And we just look forward to being with you and sharing this wonderful experience with you. So, with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. Of course, as you all know, Daniel Peterson and Brent Gardner will be joining us on the tour, and we look forward to them sharing some insights and some teachings throughout the tour, and also others that will be with us. And I really enjoy that opportunity to have them along with us. We do still have a few spaces available on the tour. We have 6 spaces available. So if anybody knows anyone that would like to join us, please shoot me an email or call me tomorrow, and we'll see what we can do to get them on the tour with us. So anyway, we'll do that the best that we can. So okay, well, we are going to be talking about Mesoamerica and the possible locations of the land of the Book of Mormon. Um, you all should have received this map in preparation for the tour, as well as some other things we'll get to in a minute. And this kind of shows where we think that some of these locations are. And so we're going to be traveling through a lot of this area. This is really an amazing experience because we are going to travel through about where 85% of the history of the Book of Mormon took place. So we're going to be able to, talk about possible locations, places such as the city of Nephi, Lehi's landing site, the waters of Mormon, the East Wilderness, and many, many others. So we're going to go through those tonight in our presentation. Now, I know that a lot of you are very well versed in this information, so I hope I'm not repeating too many things that you already know. I don't want to make it boring for you, but I do just want to touch on a few things as we go tonight. First of all, I do want to let you know a little bit about who we are. This is my dad, Joseph Allen, who many of you have heard of, maybe some of you know. But he passed away last year, and he started our business in 1970. So it's been a few years since we started doing this. I was 10 years old at the time, and he took me down to Mexico with him as he started to study and do research for his doctoral dissertation, which he entitled A Comparative Study of Quetzalcoatl, the Feathered Serpent God of Mesoamerica, with Jesus Christ, the God of the Nephites. And from that little bit of study that he did, not little study, a lot of study, but that short trip that we made, uh, we finally grew into this wonderful business that we do. Dad was teaching Institute in El Paso at the time. He taught with CES for 18 years and then decided to go full time into the tours. Through that time, he or we, I guess I could say, have written several other books. This is our first book of exploring the lands of the Book of Mormon that we released in 1989. Following that, he wrote some other books, one called Sacred Sites, one called Visualizing the Lands of the Book of Mormon. And then, of course, our most recent book, second edition of Exploring the Lands of the Book of Mormon in 2008. Our most recent publication is a book called Precious Place, Promised Place, Precious People. And that came out a few years ago, and it's been a wonderful success as well. So if any of you would like a copy of that, please let me know. And just kind of so you know, I guess what I used to look like, I used to have black hair, but time keeps passing by. But anyway, I'm so excited to be with you, and it's been such an honor for me to be with my dad all these years and learn from him so many of the things that we talk about, as well as through my own research and study and so forth. So we're going to jump into it right now. Um, when we first went down in 1970, we went to the National Museum of Anthropology and History in Mexico City. It had only been opened about 5 or 6 years at that time, and it's probably one of the finest kinds of its kind of museum in the world. It has so many artifacts and information from the ancient cultures of Mesoamerica. And so that's really where it all began. And then we started escorting people down to kind of see if we could tie things together. So This is a 14-day tour that we're going to be doing. We're going to be going to this region of Mexico and Central America. Mexico is actually part of North America. Some people still don't know that. But Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and Belize are all part of Central America. And so, but this is the lands where we think the Book of Mormon took place. It's called Mesoamerica. It means this physical location, as well as the time period before the coming of the Spaniards in 1519. So when you say Mesoamerica, you're talking about both time and place. Here are some of the ancient cultures that existed in that region. The Maya, of course, are heavily involved in what we talked about in terms of Book of Mormon, as well as the Zapotecs, the Olmecs, and the Teotihuacanos. Now, Teotihuacan is just outside of Mexico City, where the Aztecs were from. Aztecs had nothing to do with the Book of Mormon. They didn't show up till 1325 AD. So they were very, very late, but still have some great history that we'll talk about on the tour. Now, as we get started, one thing I always like to say, we're going to be talking about a lot of archaeological sites tonight in relationship with the Book of Mormon. However, we do not base our testimonies of the Book of Mormon on our knowledge of archaeological sites. The testimony of the Book of Mormon should come from studying and pondering and praying about it and receiving that spiritual witness as all of you have done and as we have done. As we visit these archaeological sites, it's more to enhance our understanding of the Book of Mormon, to see what it can help us learn more about the Book of Mormon and what the Book of Mormon can help us learn about some of these archaeological sites. And so we'll be bringing that up as we go. So if that's the case, then why study the geography of the Book of Mormon? If it's not necessary to get a testimony, it's not necessary to our salvation, why study the Book of Mormon? Well, as I kind of mentioned, we believe that the more we know about the history, culture, language, and geography of the Book of Mormon, the more we know about the Book of Mormon. And that knowledge can assist in reinforcing the deep spiritual messages within its pages. As we have studied over the years, we early on determined that we needed to have some kind of a measuring stick with which to determine if a site or a place or an event correlated with the Book of Mormon. And so we came up with 4 basic criteria. Now, I mentioned that to somebody one time, and he said, "Well, I've got about 100 criteria." That's true. There are a lot of things that we could put in, but most of them will fall under these. And these are really the first 4 that we think have to be in place as we are looking for Book of Mormon lands. And they are linguistic evidence. We know the Book of Mormon is a written record. Therefore, there should be a written language wherever we're going to propose as the place of the events in the Book of Mormon. Archaeological evidence. There should be civilizations and cities and structures and all those things that go along with archaeology during the right time period. And we're going to talk about more of that in just a minute. 90 to 95% of all the archaeological sites in the Americas that date to the Book of Mormon found in Mesoamerica. Historical evidence. We look for histories and oral histories, written histories, things that can help us to see that there are stories similar to or that very closely mirror the story from the Book of Mormon and may even be that exact story. So we'll talk about several of those throughout the trip. We also look at culture patterns, things like clapping their hands for joy, burdens on their back, and things like that. And so we'll bring all those out to help us understand that as well. And then finally, our 4th criteria is geography. We don't even get to that one until number 4, because if none of those other things are in place, it's hard to look at the geography, look at a map and say, well, it's here and here and here, and then to come to find out, well, it doesn't have this other right criteria. So once these others are in place, then we can say, all right, does the geography fit? And Mesoamerica is the only place in all the Americas that meets all 4 of the above requirements. So that gets pretty exciting as we start looking at things like that. Now, some of the things that we have studied and we'll reference tonight and throughout the tour, the individuals and other records that have helped us are people such as John Lloyd Stevens. Many of you have probably heard of him. He was called the father of Mesoamerican archaeology. He was born the same year as the prophet Joseph Smith. So they were contemporaries. And he along with a companion by the name of Frederick Catherwood, went down and traveled through these areas in the late 1830s. And Cathwood was an artist, and so he drew some amazing drawings of what they were seeing, of some of the areas that they visited. And with the help of those two individuals, they wrote a couple of volumes of books chronicling their stories, their events, their explorations. And so we comment on those quite a bit because they also help support our understanding better of the things of Mesoamerica in relationship with the Book of Mormon. Now, a little while ago, I mentioned archaeological dating. That becomes very important because we don't want to stand in front of a building that was built at 900 AD and say, oh, is this the Temple of Nephi? So we always look at our archaeological time periods. Typically, the archaeologists have broken the time periods down into these three sections. Pre-classic, which is 2500 BC about, up to AD 250. The classic, which goes from there to 900 AD, and then the post-classic goes from 900 to AD 1500 when the Spaniards arrived. As we break that down into Book of Mormon time periods, we see that some of those early pre-classic times are early Jaredite and then middle Jaredite, and all the way through the late pre-classic and then the early classic. Notice that the classic period in archaeology, which starts at AD 250, is the same time that we get the Nephite apostasy in the Book of Mormon in 4th Nephi. And we see similar comparisons between those. And then, of course, the Book of Mormon closes at 420 AD, and the classic period goes on up to 1519, actually, again, when the Spaniards came. So we will always be talking about time periods when we're at sites. Does this fall within the Book of Mormon time period? A lot of what we see does not, because the older buildings that are there are oftentimes built under or covered over by the newer modern buildings built during the classic time period. And we'll point those out and explain the significance of that as we go throughout the tour. Some other things that we have used to study these, the lands of the Book of Mormon, is the Popol Vuh. This particular version was done by Alan Christensen. Dr. Christensen teaches at BYU. He served a mission in Guatemala, and the Popol Vuh is an amazing book that has some great teachings that we will draw from throughout the tour. Also, some other records known as the Annals of the Caciqueles and the Title of the Lords of Totonicapán. And then finally, the writings of a man by the name of Don Fernando de Alva Ixtlilxóchitl. He lived at the time of the Spanish conquest and compiled a history of the older native peoples and wrote it down because so much was lost during the conquest because of the Spanish Inquisition when they burned and destroyed so many records. So these are some of the things that we will be covering or using to teach with as we go throughout the tour. Okay, let's jump into the tour. Let's talk a little bit first about what the tour includes. I know you've seen this on the information that we've sent out, but I do want to go through these and let you see some things and then ask questions at the end if you'd like to. First of all, is this 14-day tour, so we'll have 13 nights in deluxe hotel accommodations. Now, we try to stay in 4-star hotels or better, or the best available. Sometimes there's not anything better in the areas that we want to visit. But we stay in very nice, clean, safe hotels. They take care of the rooms. They clean them very well. All their common areas are very clean, and they do a very nice job. And so you'll enjoy staying in some of these hotels. I believe all of our hotels, except the very last one, have swimming pools. So if you want to swim at night in the evening after we get back from a day, you're welcome to do that, or just relax in the beautiful grounds that they all have as well. We also include 3 internal air flights that are included in the price that you didn't have to pay extra for. One is from Guatemala City to Flores, where we'll visit Tikal, and then the second one is back, and then the third one is from Veracruz to Mexico City. And those are all on these types of planes that you see here. Excuse me, I got a little bit of a dry throat tonight. The next thing, we include 2 or more full meals every day with 1 paid beverage per meal. Most of them are buffet breakfasts at the hotels. Wonderful opportunity to try some local cuisine. Don't just stick to pancakes and eggs. Try some of their local foods. They're delicious. and you really get to know more about the culture as you try some of that. But the buffets, of course, are open to as much as you'd like, and things like that. Our second meal, or sometimes third, but usually a second meal every day, it's usually a lunch, maybe a late lunch, or a dinner, depending on where we are and how close we are to certain places. On those days that we don't have a place for a third meal, or we don't have a third meal, we'll give you opportunity to sit down somewhere and get something to eat, either a fast food place or a store, and just buy some snacks to get you through until we get to our other meal of the day. Oh, one more thing on that before we leave that. Um, all the food to eat in the restaurants is fine. It's safe, it's clean. Even the lettuce, the water, the ice that they serve is all purified, so you don't have to worry about anything like that. There is also plenty of bottled water available wherever we go. So if we're out and around, you can always find a good, nice, safe drink to go. Okay, the next thing is first class bus transportation. We use wonderful buses that get us from place to place. Sometimes people ask us, why don't you fly more? Why do you travel by bus? Well, traveling by bus lets us see more of the land, and it gets us to places that we can't get to by air flights because they don't have major airlines flying into them. And so, to me, it's such a great experience to see the people as we drive through their villages or through their farmland and see how they live. And so that becomes a very great experience for us. All the entrance fees and guide services to the places listed on the itinerary are included in the price. You never have to pay extra to go to a place that is listed in the itinerary. Um, Occasionally, there will be a place that's not listed that if we have time, we can maybe make an extra stop. But that will just be, if everybody wants to do that. And so we'll have some great experiences as we do that. All taxes and tips on group items, for example, for our tips to our guides, our drivers, our bellboys, are all included in the price of the tour. And we have some wonderful people that we have worked with for a long time down there. These are just a few of them that have been with us over the years and help us out so much. They're just wonderful, wonderful people. And you'll get to know that as well. If you don't speak Spanish, don't worry. Um, at least half of the people on these pictures speak English, or they're speaking up to get by, or we're there to help as well. But if you know Spanish or if you're learning Spanish, try it out. They love to hear people try to speak their language. Um, Also, we provide literature and maps, which you should have already received. And again, if you haven't received some of these things, please call me and let me know, and we'll get those off to you. Sorry, I don't know what's going on here tonight. And then finally, this is kind of bragging, I guess. Escorted by professional tour director Blake Joseph Allen. That's me. Um, like I said, I've been going down since I was 10 years old. I was showing people around Mexico City as a teenager, and I've been doing this mostly all of my adult life. And so I've been down to these areas probably over 150 times, 200 times over the years. And I just love going down there. And I hope you end up loving it as much as I do. Okay. Um, sorry, we'll also see 6 LDS temples. Now, we don't get to go to sessions. Number one, we're a very big group. It's hard to get, enough spaces in a session to go. A lot of times we don't have the time to do it anyway, and we don't often, we don't want to take away from the locals who may have traveled for several hours that day to get to a temple to attend the temple themselves. So, but we will stop and see these temples and take some pictures. Um, they are all open and operating except the middle one on the top, the Miraflores. That's a brand new temple in Guatemala City that's still under construction. We'll drive by and see that one and show how far along it is and tell some stories about that. Okay, let's get into the nitty gritty of the tour. On day one, we'll fly into Guatemala City. If you don't have your airfare yet, please get that as soon as possible and send me a copy of your itinerary so that we know when you'll be arriving and when you'll be going home as well, so that we can coordinate that with whatever we might need to do. On the day you arrive in Guatemala, it doesn't matter what time you get there, you just have to get there that day. Um, there's a free shuttle from the airport to the hotel. It's only about a 10-minute ride. Um, if we have enough people arriving all at the same time, we'll have a bus to bring us in. But I can't always guarantee that everybody will be arriving close together. Some people like to do the red eye flight the night before and get there like at 6:30 in the morning. If you do that, I can't guarantee that there will be space, hotel room for you that early in the day because they're still checking people out. They've got to clean. So it just depends on how full they are to be able to get you in that first morning. So you may end up sitting in the lobby for a couple hours to rest and do that. So just be aware of that as you're booking your flights. But they do make every effort to get us in as soon as possible. And like I say, we'll be there when you arrive and get you all checked in and accommodated and everything like that. So just any time that day is fine. Um, Guatemala City is an amazing place. There's about 7 million people in the city. It's a beautiful mountain valley. You can see some volcanoes off to the west of the cities. You see here on the right. The volcano you can see there on the left is active, and periodically you'll see puffs of smoke coming up from it. Sometimes at night, if you're in the right place, you can actually see a glow, and occasionally it will erupt, but not very often. But it's just an absolutely beautiful place that you will enjoy as we get into Guatemala City there. Okay, that was our day one. Our second day, we'll be in Guatemala City most of the day. We'll first go to this giant outdoor relief map. They built this in 1905, and this shows the topography of the entire country of Guatemala. We'll be able to see, the highlands in the south where all the mountains are and the volcanoes. There are 33 volcanoes in Guatemala. Only 3 are active, but it's quite an amazing place. And then in the north part of the country is very flat. That's the Petén region, the Petén jungle, and it's just such a contrast in geography. It's amazing to look at. So we'll talk about that and kind of put on the map where things are in relationship to the Book of Mormon and give us a good orientation as we start off our day. After that, we'll go to Caminahuyu. It's right inside Guatemala City. This is the area that we propose to be the city of Nephi. It was inhabited as early as 1500 BC. So before Nephi arrived, there were people here. You can also see that after the close of the Book of Mormon, there were people here until the coming of the Spaniards. So this city was inhabited for a very, very long time. Today, it's mostly covered with the dirt and the grass, as you can see in the top picture, because the material that they used was not the stone that we see in later cultures or later time periods. It's made of adobe and clay. And if they were to leave that exposed, it would wash away and be destroyed and we'd lose it all. You can also see some of the Guatemala City in the background of a couple of those pictures. The one on the bottom left is a doorway covered by a tin roof that we'll go in and see. And it looks like this. Parts of this building were built around 585 BC, the same time period that Nephi was building his temple. I'm not saying this is Nephi's temple, just saying it was built the same time period. And we'll talk about that and how this general area relates to the city of Nephi and some of the events that took place there. That afternoon, we will actually fly to the city of Flores that we talked about earlier, where we'll be visiting the archaeological site of Tikal. That evening, we'll stay at a place called the Hotel Jungle Lodge because we are out in the middle of the jungle. But it's a beautiful place. They've done a fantastic job with it. They've just been remodeling some of it the last few years. And so you really enjoy that. And you'll enjoy hearing the sounds of the jungle and just seeing the beauty of the area. And so we'll spend the night there. And the following day, we will visit the site of Tikal. And you can see some of the pyramids here. The one on the left is called Temple 1. They just named them by the numbers that they found them. And then the one on the right, Temple 1, is the farthest one in the distance that you can see. So that kind of gives you an idea of how tall those trees are. As you can see how you can only see the very top part of it. Then the shorter one just in front of it is Temple 2. They actually face each other. And so the picture on the left was taken from the top of Temple 2, looking at Temple 1. The one on the right is Temple number 3. Imagine that, 1, 2, 3. And that one is actually not excavated except for that very top part. So we'll get to see what it looked like before they excavate these sites, because they don't always excavate all of them for various reasons. But anyway, that kind of gives you an idea of what Tikal is going to look like. Our hotel is just in the right hand picture is in the top left, out in the middle of all those trees. And so again, you are out in the middle of the jungle. So after we visit the site, we will return to the airport and fly back to Guatemala City that evening. Then our next day, we will depart and we'll first go to the city called Antigua. Antigua means old. It means old Guatemala City. It was where the capital was prior to Guatemala City, where it is today. There was an earthquake in 1773, I believe it was, that just basically leveled the city of Antigua. And so they had to move from there into Guatemala City and rebuild their capital. We'll visit a jade shop. This is a great experience. The fellow on the left will explain to us all about jade, how it's found, how they process it. They make it into artifact. No, they didn't make it into artifacts because when they were making it, it was to be used. But they now make it into replicas and jewelry and things like that. Matter of fact, that's a piece of jade that he's leaning on right there. On the right is Mary Lou Ridinger, who her and her husband founded this store and actually brought jade production back to Guatemala. Everybody thought that it was a dead industry, and they brought it back, and it's been a great thing. Jade is important because in the Book of Mormon, it tells us that the Nephites had gold and silver, which is also in this area, and precious stones. Jade is that precious stone. The Maya prized jade over gold and silver. They made more things out of jade than they did the other things. And so we'll talk about that and why that is so important. And then you can buy some stuff. So ladies, get your eyes on some of the stuff there in the background, and your husband will buy whatever you want. After that, we'll continue on to Lake Atitlan. Lake Atitlan is where we propose the waters of Mormon to be. Now, you're probably looking at that saying, wait a minute, Blake, that looks a lot bigger than that painting by Arnold Freeberg in the front of the Book of Mormon. Yeah, it does. And we're going to talk about why. And we're there. We'll talk about why it had to be so large and what events took place to help us determine that. I'll just give you a teaser right now. It had to be big enough to cover over 3 cities. And this lake is not only big enough to do that, but there are cities buried beneath the water. So we'll talk about that as we're there at Lake Atitlan. Let's see. On day 4, then we'll actually take a cruise out on the lake. This is a view from our hotel. Every hotel room has a balcony that faces this beautiful lake. It's been called one of the most beautiful lakes in the world. There are 3 volcanoes across the lake from us. There's one on the right and 2 on the left, one behind the other, so you can't see the second one. All are dormant right now, inactive, so that we don't have to worry about that. But it's just fascinating to go and be at the base of some of these volcanoes and imagine what it might have been like during that great destruction that took place at the death of Christ. We'll go on a lake cruise, and we'll talk about the waters of Mormon. We'll talk about Alma and his people as they went there fleeing King Noah, as they baptized in the waters of Mormon, and some of the history there. As they were trying to do what was right and repent from the things that had been taking place in the city of Nephi. We'll actually spend most of the day out on the lake, and then the afternoon we'll have some free time to relax or do a little souvenir shopping, or maybe some other activities that we can recommend to you if you'd like to do that. Our next day, day 5, is actually a Sunday, so we'll be going to church in the little branch, and I couldn't find my picture in time to put it in here today, but there's just a little branch chapel there in the little town of Panajachel is the name of the town. So we'll attend church, and then we'll go from there to Tapachula in Mexico. So we'll be crossing the border that day. We'll be traveling through the beautiful Guatemala highlands. They're farmed everywhere. I mean, you can see this going over the top of the hill here. And literally, they will actually farm right up the hillside in some places. And they do that because they water mostly by rain, during the rainy season. Now we're going right at the end of the rainy season, so the rain should stop. We hope. You might want to bring a poncho or a small umbrella just in case, but hopefully we won't get any rain, and it'll still be green and beautiful. A lot of the crops will be harvested, but it's an amazing thing as we travel through that land, as we'll talk about some of the agricultural statements in the Book of Mormon as we travel through those areas and the lands that we think we may be traveling through as well. So we'll leave beautiful Lake Atitlan, which everybody hates to leave, and we'll go to a place called Tapachula in the state of Chiapas in Mexico. We'll cross the border that day because we are a large group and we'll be going to church first. That's all we're going to get done that day to get across the border and into our hotel. But the next day, let's see, what are we on? Day 6, we'll be visiting a site called Izapa. Again, Izapa, you see, was a city that was very old and lasted very late. And so this is the area that we actually think is the land of first inheritance in the area where Lehi landed. Now, he didn't land at Izapa because Izapa is about 18 miles in from the coast, but he probably would have ended up there because it would have been the major city in that area. It's got a fascinating history, especially as we talk about the origins of the Mayan calendar and how that might relate with the Nephite calendar and some other astronomical events and occurrences. So this is a great site to visit. We're talking about Lehi's first landing. In this area, they've discovered more than 80 monuments, mostly called stela or altars. Sorry, I lost the word there for a minute. So a stela stands upright, as you can see some of them underneath the tin sheds there, and the altar lays down in front of them, as you see. One of the most famous, at least for the LDS community, is one called Stela 5 that has been labeled the Tree of Life stone. Here's an artist's rendition of what that stone looked like. It's, you can see some of the outline, but it's getting really hard to see. So this is kind of what it looks like. Now, not everybody agrees that this is a rendition of Lehi's dream, the Tree of Life, but we're going to go through that on the tour and talk about some of the elements that do appear to relate to Lehi and his family. So we'll talk about that and point those out, and some of you may already know some of those things and can share that with us as well. As we leave Tapachula and Izapa that day, we will then travel to a place called Tuxtla Gutierrez. Tuxtla Gutierrez is the state capital of the state of Chiapas. Chiapas is a very, very large state. It has only 3% of the population of Mexico, but it's got 33% of the wild animals of Mexico. So it's still a very rugged, rural, rustic part of the country. And we'll have some fun talking about that and seeing some things and talking about how, again, some of those animals relate to the Book of Mormon. As we travel through that area, we'll travel that longer stretch of it before the curve right there, and we'll come to a place called Paredon. Paredon is the area in the Book of Mormon that we think is the day-and-a-half journey of a Nephite. Does it go from the East Sea to the West Sea? No, it doesn't. It only covers about 12 miles. That's certainly much more understandable for a Nephite to be able to travel 12 miles in a day and a half than the 250 that would be from the East Sea to the West Sea or some other location. And so we'll talk about that and see where that area might have been and why they picked that area to build this day and a half or the day and a half journey, which was actually a fortification line to keep the Lamanites out of the land of Zarahemla. As we get into Tuxtla Gutierrez, then the next day, this will be day 8, we'll visit a site called Chiapa de Corzo. Chiapa de Corzo is a marvelous city. It's not big. There's no large ruins. The building on the right is the largest ruins there. And so it's not one of the magnificent buildings, but it does date to the Book of Mormon period. And so that's an exciting thing because there was a stone discovered here that dates to 36 BC. That's the time period when the Nephites lost the land of Zarahemla and had to flee to the land Bountiful. And so we'll talk about that history and how that correlates. You can see here that the old name for Chiapa de Corzo is Saktun, which means white or limestone. Thidum is an Old World name that we get in the Book of Mormon for the name of this area, which also means white stone or limestone. So we get a name correlation, and we'll be looking at some of those throughout the journey as well to help bring things together. After we visit this exciting site, we'll go for a river ride, speedboat ride on the Grijalva River that we propose to be the River Sidon. Now, again, there are others that think that a different river is the candidate for the River Sidon, and we'll talk about that. And do I dare say why they're wrong? No, I'm just kidding. We respect everybody's opinion, and if they want to choose that other river, that's fine. We'll talk about that. And we'll talk about why the differences and why we choose this river here. But this is quite fun because we get again to learn about the culture and get a feeling of the lay of the land and where some of the events of the Book of Mormon again may have taken place. That afternoon, then, after we visit those two places, we'll bus to Villahermosa. We'll go over a mountain called I forgot it. Oh, through the Black Forest. Absolutely beautiful drive. It's just we're up in the mountains. We start to see cattle ranches. We see a little bit of change in climate, but then we drop down again to coastal level as we come to the city of Villahermosa. Villahermosa is in an area that we propose to be the land among many waters in the Book of Mormon. So you can see the city on the left with the Grijalva River that actually flows through it that we would have been on earlier that day. And so that river flows through and goes on to the Gulf Coast of Mexico, as it says, that went to the sea in the Book of Mormon. The picture on the right shows you kind of what is probably meant by the land among many waters that the people of Limhi described as they came out of the land of Nephi searching for Zarahemla when they did not find Zarahemla and then had to return back to the city of Nephi. So that's kind of fascinating that we'll see there. On day 9, we'll visit the archaeological site of Palenque. Now, I'm sure many of you know or have heard of Palenque. It is an amazing, amazing site. It is mostly post-Book of Mormon, but we can talk about some things here that do relate to the Book of Mormon. On the right of this photo here, you see the palace with the tower there, and then on the left is called the Temple of the Inscriptions, where the King Pakal is buried. He's buried down in the bottom, about 5 feet underground. So you'd have to go up the stairs to the top of the temple, which is about 80 feet, or excuse me, 75 feet, and then 80 feet down to the tomb of Pakal. And we're going to talk about that and why that's important. I mean, he was an amazing king. And so we'll discuss that. You'll love visiting Palenque. One building that we'll also visit at Palenque is called the Temple of the Cross that you see on the left. Some of it has fallen off. You can see that part of the walls are missing there. But what's exciting about the Temple of the Cross is this panel on the right. Up inside of the building there's this large panel that has been represented here in this leather replica of the panel that shows what that looked like. What's fascinating about this is that glyph that's highlighted right there that has been translated by some people to mean "and it came to pass." I've never heard of that phrase before. Have you? Why is that important? Yeah, it appears in the Book of Mormon over 1,400 times. And so we'll talk about that and how that relates to their language and how their written language was done, their dating, how their calendar worked. Lots of great things as we're able to visit this archaeological site here. That evening, we'll return back to Villahermosa, and the next day we'll head off to the west. And now we're getting into the Olmec territory. This whole time we've pretty much been in Mayan territory. Now we're going to enter the Olmec territory that we again propose to be the Jaredites, or the Jaredites part of the Olmec civilization. We'll first, as we leave Villahermosa, there's actually an outdoor museum in the city of Villahermosa dedicated to the Olmec civilization. These archaeological stones were located in a place called La Venta that we'll be going to the same day after the museum. but it's way out in the swampy areas. And when they discovered them, nobody could get there to see them, so they brought them into Villahermosa, put them in this outdoor museum so that people could enjoy them and learn from them. So we'll see some of these and talk about them and how they relate to the Jaredite culture. And we also see these large stone heads, which are very typical of the Jaredites, because they were a very large people. We read about in the Book of Mormon and talk about how that works as well. We will go then to, as I mentioned, the archaeological site of La Venta and visit that. You can see on the left picture the pyramidal structure in the background. That is a pyramid. However, it is just made of dirt. It's not made of stone or anything like that. And so they have to keep it covered and growing to protect it as well. But you can see some of these massive monuments. The one there on the left is a replica. I think I've got it here back here on this picture, the one in the center. That's the original. So this one on the left now is the replica, and they put them where they were located at the site. We also see this figure on the right that is representative of an Olmec figure as well. So this will be a fun site as we learn about the history of the Olmecs and the Jaredites and how they correlate together. We have 11 evidences that link the Jaredites and the Olmecs together. Later that afternoon, we will pass by the hill that we think is the hill Shim from the Book of Mormon. It's really hard to see, so we can't always see it because when these pictures were taken, the trees in front were quite low. Now the trees have all grown up and you can't see it very well because the trees block our view from where we have to drive. But the amazing thing about this site is today it's called Sintepec. You see that there at the top of the list. Sintepec is an Aztec word that means corn hill. The ancient name was Xim, which also means corn, and it's pronounced Chim. The X is pronounced SH, and in the Book of Mormon, it was called Shim. So there may be a name correlation here as well, as corn also was the most grown agricultural product in the Book of Mormon, and is still the most important product agriculturally in Mesoamerica. That evening, I didn't get a picture of this one, but that evening we'll stay at a little hotel that is, it's an amazing little place. It's on a beautiful lake called Lake Tatemaco, and we'll enjoy our stay there. Our following day, we are on day 11, and we'll bus to Veracruz to catch a flight into Mexico City. But on the way to Veracruz, we're going to stop at a place called Santiago Tuxtla and see up close one of the largest of the Olmec stone heads. This stone head weighs about 24 tons. And so it's just massive. They don't know exactly who it represented. Probably represented a ruler, a priest, a king, or a military leader of some sort. And so we'll be able to go and get some pictures of that in this little village of Santiago Tuxtla. But maybe more importantly, is we'll see the hill Vigía, that we propose to be the hill Cumorah in the Book of Mormon. Now, you're going to say, wait a minute, there's already hill Cumorah in New York. And again, if I'm telling you stuff you already know, just bear with me. Because again, we think this is where the battles took place. This is where the Nephites lived at the end of the history of the Book of Mormon, where they were destroyed. And then we think that Moroni then transported the plates to New York, where he buried them there in the hill where Joseph Smith could find them 1,400 years later. Also, this is the hill Rama of the Jaredites. The hill Rama and the hill Cumorah were the same hill. Moroni tells us that they're the same hill where both civilizations were destroyed. What an amazing coincidence that is. They were both destroyed at the same place. Well, that afternoon we'll continue on and go into Veracruz. On our way, we will pass through an area called the Papalawapan Water Basin that we believe to be the waters of Ripliancum. There's also a name correlation here that we'll talk about. And at some point, you'll think, wait a minute, the ocean's on the wrong side of us because some of that water seems so large. And so we'll travel through that and get an idea of where, for example, Coriantumr was backed up against as he was fighting Shiz, and it says he came up to the waters of Ripliancum, and they could not go further because this is kind of what they ran into, which is nearly impassable without a canoe or something like that. We'll catch a flight then into Mexico City that evening, and we'll have 2 more days in Mexico City. Mexico City is one of the largest cities in the world. They say there's about 26 million people that live in the Valley of Mexico here. It's an amazing city. When we first started going, it was just a small city of about 12 million people, so it's always been big. But you can see how much it's grown over the years. And so you'll enjoy Mexico City. It's a very different experience, but one that you'll remember forever. Then on day 12, we will go to Teotihuacan. This is such a great site because it began during the Book of Mormon period, about 150 BC, and was abandoned about 650 AD. So it was pretty much a Nephite period city, and we'll talk about how this may be the city like Jacob Bugoth in the land northward, in the land among many, in the land of large bodies of water, and how it relates and things like that. We'll see the Pyramid of the Sun. They're not letting us, at least they didn't the last time I was there, let us climb the Pyramid of the Sun. They stopped it during COVID, and the locals are trying to get it to reopen it again because it's such an amazing experience to do that. We'll also see the Pyramid of the Moon, talk about the astronomy of the Mesoamerican people and how that relates. And then finally on the right, the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, dedicated to the deity Quetzalcoatl, again, the figure that my father wrote his dissertation about in correlation with the Savior in the Book of Mormon. Now, obviously, what we see on this temple here does not represent the Savior in his purest form. This is an apostate version of that deity of Quetzalcoatl that devolved over the year to become much different than what the Savior was as we know him. Then our final day in Mexico City, we'll attend church with a local ward and see the LDS temple, and then we'll visit this National Museum of Anthropology. It's such a great museum. As I mentioned at the beginning of the evening, my dad took me here when I was 10 years old when he was studying. He would go back in the archives and study from all these wonderful books that were available there. And he just turned me loose in this big museum as a 10-year-old kid. And he probably told the guards at the front door, hey, don't let this kid out. Make sure he's here when I come find him. And so that was my first experience in Mexico, was just wandering around that museum every day for about a month. And it was fascinating. I fell in love with the Mexican culture, the history, the ancient cultures, and you're just going to enjoy going through this museum. Unfortunately, we can't see the entire museum. It's way too big to visit in one day. We try to do it in about 3 hours, and even then, we can't see everything that we'd like to. We'll highlight some of the stuff that relate to what we've been talking about on the tour. It's a great review for what we've seen on the tour, and will help us kind of have a wonderful conclusion to our experience in the lands of the Book of Mormon. We'll see things such as the statue of Tlaloc, the rain god, that is just outside of the museum. He actually was found at Teotihuacan, and it's about 30, 40 miles outside of Mexico City. And they said the day they moved him to Mexico City, he is the god of rain. It just rained buckets all day long. He was not a happy camper. On the right, we have the Aztec calendar stone, which is a representation of the Aztec calendar, which was actually copied from the Maya calendar. And so we'll talk about those. You can actually walk up and have your picture taken right at the base of that massive, massive Aztec calendar stone. And then finally, our last day is our day to fly home and leave this wonderful land. I absolutely love these areas. I've fallen so much in love with the people. They're very warm and friendly people. I feel bad with how they're portrayed oftentimes in the media, because they are a very kind, wonderful people for the most part. And you're going to find that as we travel through this area as well. So that's basically our tour. You'll never read the Book of Mormon the same. It will change your life like it does every time we read it. And you'll start to see things, and as you read in the Book of Mormon, you say, oh, I can see how that worked now. I can see why they went from here to there. I can see how they built their structure. I can see the foods they grew and different things like that. And it will just be a life-changing experience for you. So again, I want to thank all of you for being willing to go with us on this journey. Every time I go on a tour, I come home and the next day I tell my wife, when do we get to go again? And so I know you're going to love it, and we'll have just a marvelous time on the tour. So thank you for listening to me tonight. I hope that was helpful to you and answered a lot of your questions. Um, we did send out a form called Preparation for Travel, which will answer a lot of questions as well. And we can go through some questions now tonight and talk about that and answer those. And if you do have any questions after tonight, please feel free to email me or text me or call me, and we can talk about those individually if you need to do that. So again, thank you, and we look forward to being with you.